Chapter 24. Hearth and Home. In the mill house, Durant had nodded off. He awoke from dreams of his horse's hooves breaking icy crust in a snow squall whiteout. The only thing he could see, his brother, hunched over his own horse's neck, ducking his head against the storm and trying to become one with the gelding. Through the cracks of the storm shutters, Durant could see the light of day coming. He breathed in deep for the first time in hours, dull relief flooding him. Finbar Kelly was sitting on one of the long wooden benches at the centre table. A large meat cleaver he found in the kitchen rested on the table next to him. He caught Durant's eye. Durant cleared his throat. "I think we're okay. You haven't seen any of them out when the sun's up." Finn nodded. "Aye. What the things it took us when the sun rose they fell where they stood." James piped up. "Where do you think them cavalrymen went? I wonder if they got took." Durant did not reply. "I sure do hope they're okay. They saved our skins last night for certain. I know I sure wouldn't be here without them. Ha! I think I'd be about the same shade as Corporal Taylor if they hadn't come along when they did," said James. Durant nodded. James had been figuring he would get a laugh from at least one of them. Then he remembered that Finbar had never met Corporal Taylor. "Isaiah's a black fella," James explained. Finn still did not laugh. James shrugged to himself. He still thought it was a pretty witty thing. He had been replaying the heroes riding out of the darkness to his rescue all night, and had imagined how it would have played out had they not come along to halt his crispy conclusion. As he pictured his body blackening, he had made the instant comparison to Isaiah's complexion, and it nearly made him giggle out loud. But he realized Lieutenant Durant was unlikely to find that kind of behavior acceptable. He nearly bit his lower lip off to keep from giggling. Now, with the sun up, he could no longer contain it. He giggled. Finn looked at him. "Sorry," said James through the giggle fit. "If you knew Corporal Taylor, you'd think it's mighty funny too." Durant headed for the front door. He opened it and stepped out onto the porch beneath the little wooden awning. He closed his jacket, still damp from the stream, against the brisk cut of the cold air. Finbar stepped out and joined him. "Christ, it's bloody freezing. Can we close the door and have a fire? The clothes are still soaking from the fucking Somme." "Yeah, I think that's safe," said Durant. Durant and Finn found a large stack of seasoned firewood, shielded from the rain by the mill's deep awnings. They called James out. The three men collected armloads of logs and kindling and bore it back inside. They closed the door and opened all the storm shutters to allow the welcome light of the sun in, then set to getting the large hearth filled with a blazing fire. Once the fire peaked, Durant and Finn stripped down and laid their clothes out on the stone hearth, where the last dampness began to steam up out of them. James scoured the larder and discovered a half of a cured ham and a loaf of bread. The bread had staled since its baking on Good Friday, but for the three of them, who had not eaten in what felt like forever, it was delicious. After they filled their bellies and dressed in clothes that were dry and hot to the touch, they all felt reborn. Finn rummaged through the house and came back with a tobacco pouch and a pipe. He lit a long twig from the pile of kindling and touched it to the bowl, puffing until it fired up into a smoking ember. "Well, what the hell do we do now?" Finn asked. He did not direct the query at anyone in particular, so it hung in the room with fire's heat and the smoke from the tobacco. "I wish I knew, but I don't," said Durant. "I vote we should stay here and eat some more ham," said James, "and wait for that Major Danforth and his fellows to come back. I think they seem to know what they're all about. Better than we do, at any rate. Maybe, said Finn. But I can't say I relish the idea of spending the night in this same place twice. Why? Asked James. Seemed to me those fellows found us a pretty good spot to hunker down. I don't see any dead folks but for the one in pieces out there in the field. Finn cut him off. A baker's dozen of those things show up at the door. There's nothing we could do to stop them. They wouldn't have to do a thing besides pile the rest of that firewood by the door and set a match to it. He'd be black as your friend in a flash. James, chastened, was uncertain how to respond. Well, before we ran into them German sons of guns last night, we were headed for Siegfried's something. What's that? Asked Finn. James looked at Durant. I'm not for sure on that. Lieutenant? Some kind of defensive line that the Germans were falling back to. We were headed there with a couple of Germans, Wolfgang and, Durant struggled for the boy's name. Jonah, said James. He explained to Finn. He's a real nice Jewish kid, real nice young fella. I'd never met a Jewish fella before, and he turned out to be a real nice kid. He fixed my watch for me. Durant nodded. They were from a First Guards MG squad, prisoners. They ran with us when it all started off. What's this Siegfried something supposed to be? Asked Finn. They said it's a fortified position. At first we were going to try for the fort down at Verdun. The thinking being we can try to hole up somewhere that's really secure and hope this all washes through. Then Wolfgang told us about the Siegfried fortifications. They're a hell of a lot closer than Verdun is. Finn nodded agreement. Aye, Verdun's got to be a couple 100 miles at the least. The German line doesn't sound like a half bad idea. How far do you figure? Durant shrugged. Half a day, maybe. If we keep heading due east, we'll have to run into it at some point. I'm for that, said Finn. Durant nodded. But what about Major Danforth? Asked James. Shouldn't we give them fellows some time to get back here? Finn puffed on the pipe. Lad, they can handle themselves as well as anyone with their horses and their swords. I'm not staying here twiddling my bloody thumbs, waiting for the hangman to come along and string me up, you know? I'm for heading east as fast as we fucking can and seeing that fort with my own eyes while the sun's shining, so that if it's a pile of rubbish I can find somewhere else to fucking hide before the sun's setting. Durant nodded. It seems like as good a way as there is. I think if we leave here at noon, we can get there by midday, which will keep our options open. We can sleep here until then. Maybe the Major and his men come back before that, in which case we'll make better time on their horses than we can on foot. And we can leave them a note telling them where we're headed if they don't get back by then, said James cheerily. Finn glared at him. Are you fucking daft? You think those fucking things can't read? The bloody fuckers that took my company, they spoke fucking Latin. Only people I know to speak fucking Latin are priests. If they can speak Latin, they can fucking read. James was suitably chastened. Gosh, I was just trying to say that we should look out for those fellows like they looked out for us. You don't have to use that word so much. Jesus fucking Christ. Finn looked at Durant. Where'd you find this one here? Durant did not answer that. It was all too long a story and not worth sharing. We'll stay here till noon. Speaking for myself, I'm not going to make it if I don't get a little bit of sleep at least. You're both welcome to do the same. Finn tapped the dead ashes out of the pipe onto the hearth and blew them into the fire. Right, fair enough. Wake me and I'll go with you when you go. You shot a look at James. But we're not leaving a fucking note. Understand? James swallowed and nodded. Sure thing. Finn spread out a blanket near the fire and lay back. He was snoring gently within a minute of closing his eyes. James and Durant found their own spots and did the same. Before Durant fell asleep, he caught James looking at him, a bit more subdued than usual. What is it? Durant asked. I was thinking, probably just dumb, but I was thinking about everybody else. Wonder where they got off to. I sure hope they're okay out there. Durant rubbed his eyes. He did not want to think about that. Either are or they aren't. James nodded. Either way, Durant continued, we need to get some sleep. It's a long walk ahead. James laid back down. He shut his eyes, squeezing them tight, pretending to sleep until sleep surprised him and folded him down and in.